Okay everyone, I just wanted to do a quick introduction to the Firefox developer tools, which I use a lot. There's a very similar and almost as good set of tools in Chrome, but I'll just demo them on Firefox. So developers tools is a toolbox of many different tools that you can use to make web developing easier. Today we're really just going to talk about the inspector and changing CSS rules. So let's open up the developer tools in Firefox. The default way to get there is to click on the so-called hamburger menu in the corner and scroll down to web developer and then toggle tools. You can also do this with a keystroke, and that's how I normally do it. Control-Shift-I or Control-Shift-K will get you to the same place. By default, they are docked here on the right side of the screen. I prefer them most of the time to be docked to the bottom. Not all the time, but most of the time. So what we'll see here is a couple different panes, and each pane has its own features that you can use. On the left is a representation of the document object model, the DOM. So it shows all of the nodes in your HTML page. And you can inspect a particular node by right-clicking on it in the text and clicking Inspect Element. And you can see that it will open up here. So this is the node inspector. And this middle pane is what we'll probably be using most of the time. It describes all of the rules that apply to that element. So these are the rules that apply to the block quote, and this text align rule is inherited from its parent header. Here are the rules that apply to the H1 and to header, and if we're looking at the article, we can see there's an empty rule set for article. There's an empty rule set for article image. And if we were to scroll down, there's no rule set at all in the CSS directives for this paragraph. The first kind of object here is to show what the existing styles are. So we can see that the text align is center on this block quote, and that's what is giving us the center text. There's better ways to center text, but that's what we're doing right now. If we want to know a little bit more information, sometimes we can find in the computed tab over here on the right a little bit more information about what the enacted rule is. So if there's a set of rules that affect an element, then the computed will show you which rule is taking priority. Now we can, that's cool already. If we want to, we can start to modify the HTML page in place, and we can do that in two places. We can do it here in the HTML inspector. We can edit a node as HTML, for instance. And that will show up in our page. Those are not persistent edits. These are just ways to experiment with small changes. So we can change the HTML, and we can also change the CSS. So, I mean, what you want to do in this assignment is start to make this card look prettier. So we can maybe do that by starting adding auto margins and max width and height. Attributes. So let me just explain what I'm doing here. I press tab and that allows me to enter a new rule. I enter it and actually I'll get a bunch of suggested values. For height and width, they're not usually that helpful. I'll say I want it to be a maximum of 80% of the viewport height. And then we see that the card has gotten smaller, but it's still a mess. So the next thing I'm going to do is change the display value to flex and change the flex direction to column. We're getting closer. So now we have a flex box that's constrained to a certain height. The margins are auto, which will center it on left and right. On top, bottom, auto doesn't really do much. And then if we go to the article inside the main, we can also make a display flex here, and boom, there we are, it's all set. So already we're getting really close. And maybe we want a margin on the top of say 3 pixels solid black. Oops, not margin. Border top. That's what I mean. And there we are. But maybe we need also some padding. Oh, maybe that doesn't work in flex. Yeah, I think padding doesn't work in flex. Anyway, blah blah blah. I think we could fix that then with gap. Anyway, it's a good start. So you can see that with the developer tools, you can experiment with changing the CSS. If you want to see what changes you've made so that you can remember it, you'll see here are all your changes, and you can copy all your changes and bring them back to your to your style sheet, wherever that is. So here's my style sheet, and I will paste it. And you can see it'll show you what styles you've changed. So this is an excellent way to experiment with your with changing CSS. Okay, that was a little bit scattered, but I hope it's still kind of helpful. I want to show you one other thing, which is this layout tab, which is now kind of awesome. The layout tab shows all the grid and CSS containers on the page and allows you to kind of to visualize how they work. So here we can turn on visualization of that flex, and we see of that flex box, the flex box associated with the container main, and we can see that the elements and the gaps show up. And if I change the gap, can see how they get bigger. And since this is also flex, there we are. And this will show you how the this will show you sort of how the items are aligned, but that's not important right now. I want to show the second. Okay, here. So I found it over here. I don't know why it was so hard to find in the Flexbox container. The child container, flex. You can also click on it by clicking on this little flex box here in the inspector, and that will activate or deactivate the visualization of the flex container. If we were to change our display here to grid, then this one would show up here. The grid is a total default grid, so it's just each item makes its own row, and that's probably what makes the most sense here for us. Like if we wanted, we could maybe here deactivate this row, this rule,